Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency meeting to order. I'd like to call on Heather Richards to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. In your role as the board for the Urban Renewal Agency, tonight you're considering the annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. What you do is you adopt this and give us the authority to present it to the city. We have noticed it in the newspaper for the last couple of Fridays. And it's different than your audit. This is an annual financial report that's required by urban renewal state law to go through some of the resources and expenses for the past year in terms of urban renewal, how we used the funding and how it impacted overlapping taxing districts. But typically for this evening, when we bring this to you, we also share with you what the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee is thinking about for the next year. In their January and February meetings, they go through their 5-year strategic plan. They look at budget recommendations and any sort of significant projects that they would recommend to move forward. So I was going to visit with you about that as well. So just to remind everyone, urban renewal is governed, it's a separate agency from the city. It's governed by the urban renewal plan and the report for that plan, and tells us how we can move forward in terms of managing the agency and the projects in it. The purpose for it is to improve specific areas of a city that are poorly developed or underdeveloped. So usually that means there's old or deteriorated buildings, and 56% of the Northeast Gateway area properties when the urban renewal plan was put together were considered low improvement value. Streets and utilities are in poor condition typically, and there's a lack of parking, and that's what described this particular urban renewal district. It allows for the agency to use the tax increment financing that's collected after the frozen base was established to fund projects which will stimulate redevelopment, business investment, and economic vitality to revitalize these areas. So you've seen this before, but this is a reminder of how urban renewal is meant to work, where you, as the agency, invest strategically in public improvement projects and private development projects to stimulate that tax base in the area that creates more tax increment financing, which pays off those urban renewal projects. And presumably by the end, when you sunset out of the area and it goes back, all of it goes back onto the tax rolls, it's at a much higher exponential rate than it would have been without this effort and investment. So it particularly in the Northeast Gateway area in this particular urban renewal plan, it has been working that way. So one of the first projects done by the agency was phase 1 of Alpine Avenue, where investment took place in taking a gravel street and making it an improved street, which then stimulated redevelopment and new investment on vacant properties or redevelopment of abandoned properties in that area, to stimulate the tax base and create jobs. And now we're working on the Northwest Rubber site as a catalytic redevelopment for that area too. This shows what the urban renewal district is. It combines 2 of your city center neighborhoods. So the city center itself, which we often call downtown, and then the Northeast Gateway area, which is has Alpine Avenue and Lafayette Avenue sort of as the grounding public improvements there. The urban renewal plan has goals and objectives that we need to make sure the projects are implementing. So public involvement, economy, encourage a unique district identity, public utilities, housing, historic preservation, development, and redevelopment. So there's 8 goals and objectives in this urban renewal plan. And when we look at projects, we look to see if they're meeting those goals and objectives. There's a baker's dozen projects in the plan, so this is how we can expend the funds collected on these projects, and the plan itself tells us how much we can expend on those in 2013 dollars, which we can escalate forward based on when we implement the projects. And there's also a time frame in the plan as to when we should implement them, and this was done after careful study and engagement with the community and discussion with property owners about where their intentions were in terms of private development needs and public improvement needs. And then the plan itself and the financial feasibility was calculated based on when these projects would hit the ground and stimulate that redevelopment. Several of the projects were also taken care of with the transportation bond that was passed after the TSP was passed. So those projects no longer needed urban renewal funding, and so that funding is now something to be reconsidered for other public improvements if necessary. And the agency itself has been focusing on two larger transportation improvement projects, the Alpine Avenue project that I discussed, phase 1, and then the 3rd Street Streetscape project, which now has become a street improvement project. And then it's been focused on the other piece that I described, which is investing in private development as catalytic redevelopment for the area. So there's been intentional decisions made to invest in development assistance programs. One of the first acts we did was create a facade improvement grant program and a development loan and grant assistance program, and we see activity in that every year. You'll see a recommendation come to you at your next meeting relative to that program. And then property acquisition, buying property to reposition it for private development to meet the goals of the district, which is what we're working on right now with the Northwest Rubber site. So to give you a dashboard of where we are, in terms of property taxes, we have collected about, and this is through fiscal year end 2025, so June 30, 2025, we've collected about $4.1 million in property tax revenue. To show you what that looks like against our financial feasibility analysis, our adopted urban renewal report identified a financial feasibility analysis which was more aggressive than what we've been seeing, so we haven't been performing to that any of the years. It looks like it shows that we should be in this fiscal year and collecting about 1.2 million in our annual increment, and we collected 684,000, so about 50% less than that financial feasibility report. What that means is it may take longer to implement the projects in the plan based on how we're collecting funds and can repay back those bonded projects. In 2016, we realized that it was a bit aggressive, and so we did a reset on the financial feasibility analysis before we went out for the Alpine Avenue bond, and we seem to be tracking there a lot better. If you look at, we're still a little bit down, and we've decreased from the previous year, and I think that's because some of our larger private properties in the district were picked up for public use and came off the tax rolls. But if you notice fiscal year end 2025, it was anticipated we'd be at 750,000 this past year, and we were at 685. So trending pretty closely. Oops, that's a duplicate. Am I going backwards? There we go. So the property assistance program, we have assigned $940,000 to that from the 2013 dollars. We've invested $618,000, a little less than that, in loans and grants. This is intended to be a revolving program. So as we have a 5-year clawback on any grant that we invest in. So if the property sells within 5 years, that grant is repaid back to the agency so that there isn't a sort of flipping mechanism to collect equity based on that investment. And then also we have loans that are paid back as well. So we've collected back $133,000 of that $617,000. And the intention is that replenishes the program to fund more private development projects. In terms of parking, we have $1 million in the plan for that. We've only spent $115,000 thus far. The bulk of that was spent on repaving the First Presbyterian Church parking lot just right outside here. That is used during the time that the church is not using it as a downtown public parking lot. And then our 3rd Street improvement project in 2013, we had about 2.3 million identified for that. We feel that's closer to 3.4 now with escalation. And we've spent 330,000 thus far on that. So in the early years, we spent money on sort of facilitating the public discussion of what do we want to do as a project. And then we started getting into design and participated in the 30% design process. with funding. And then the Alpine Avenue Street Improvement Project, $5.3 million is in the plan for that. We've spent $2 million. With the transportation bond that was passed in, I think, 2013, 2010, somewhere around there, half of the Alpine Avenue project phase 1 was paid for with that bond funding. So the Urban Renewal Agency paid for the other half. It was a $4.5 million project. And we're paying off that bond. That's the only bonded debt we currently have. The Northwest Rubber Site is the newest larger expenditure in the program. We have a carrying price for paying the interest on the loan that the city got from the wastewater fund to purchase the site, and also providing utilities and security to the site. Our carrying price through June 30 of 26 is $575,000, $620,000 with the utilities and security through the June 30 of this year. And then there's interest proceeds. So interest proceeds are interesting. You can use them as the agency for projects that meet the goals and objectives of the plan, but may not necessarily be a prescribed project in that that list of 13. And so we do keep track of the interest earned for that very reason. And we have collected about $143,000 in interest earnings over the years. So that takes us into your annual financial report. That's the dashboard is for the lifespan of the Urban Renewal Agency in this particular plan. And now we're just talking about last year. So in the annual financial report, we provide information about the money, the resources, so the revenue received by the agency, which is mostly property taxes. There's some of that property assistance loan payback that's occurring and interest income. And then how we expended funds in the past year. So you'll note that when we do a budget, we typically will budget allocations in many different projects so that the funding's there to use it if we need to use it, but we don't always use all of it. It is a captured independent fund, so it rolls over next year into the same funding program. So last year, we collected about $950,000 and we expended about $790,000. We also have to show what our long-term obligations are. So this would be our bonded debt, and we have that one bond, which is the Alpine Avenue bond. As we start to do other larger projects like the 3rd Street Improvement Project, and we take out bonds for those, you'll start seeing the sequencing of bonds in this annual report and where we're at with each of those individually. And urban renewal is meant to be used for bond. The intention is you're bonding early for larger projects to stimulate redevelopment and then paying that back with the increment financing over the lifespan of the actual district. So then we also need to calculate, provide information about what the adopted budget is for our current fiscal year that we're in. So we call it the proposed budget, and go through the same sort of process of identifying the resources that we expect and then the expenditures as well. And we have two funds for urban renewal. We have a debt fund where the property taxes come into the debt fund. That's where we pay our bonded debt from. And then we have a project fund, if you want to think of it that way. And we transfer funds from the debt fund to the project fund to pay for projects every year. So you'll see transfers in and out of those two funds with each other. We need to report our maximum indebtedness, so that's the maximum debt that we can incur to implement the plan. In the McMinnville plan, it's $30 million, and we have expended $3.9 million thus far, so about $26 million of maximum indebtedness is remaining. And then we have to report the impact on the taxing district. So this is looking at what's called foregone revenue. Foregone revenue is the revenue that based on their percentage of the overall levy rate on the property they would have collected in this past year. And it's revenue, presumably, that's more than it would have been if the district didn't exist, because we're trying to stimulate investment and create tax base at a larger rate than what's happening around the city. This is the first year you're going to see McMinnville Fire in this list. So typically, the city of McMinnville and the McMinnville School District are the two largest districts that are impacted by this program, and then Yamhill County, and then McMinnville Fire. Schools in Oregon are funded through a state school fund. So this $204,000 from, or $211,000 from the McMinnville School District doesn't mean that that's what they're losing. That means that's what the state school is losing, state school fund is losing, that gets then redistributed. So in some areas where you have larger urban renewal agencies where the impact is larger to the school districts there, they could be impacting that state school fund in a greater percentage, if you want to think of it that way. So MIRAC does work from this strategic plan where we have discussions about how to invest the funds. We're still fairly young. The increment is still fairly low. To give you some idea, when I left Redmond, we had a downtown urban renewal district, and at that point, the annual increment was about $2.3 million. That was 10 years ago. So they do get to a point where they're generating much larger increments to pay off these projects quicker towards the end of the district. But because the resources are fairly low, the discussion about how to invest them is very intentional and strategic. And so we've talked through different projects over the years. The Third Street Improvement Project is still on the list, and we'll move forward in terms of financing the next step of design for that. And then the Northwest Rubber Site is obviously on there. And this year, new to the strategic plan is Alpine Avenue Phase 2. So that's constructing the remainder of Alpine Avenue in the district. The budget discussion, the MIRAC just voted on recommending this to the Urban Renewal Board when you go through your budget process. But it's to populate the typical funds that we populate, so development assistance and housing development, that's the loan and grant programs. Third Street improvement, to fund the downtown master plan, which we're hoping to get underway here very soon. To fund administration, so the agency does pay the city to administer the program. It's not a full cost recovery. The plan actually has a cap on how much the agency can pay the city for administration. To continue to fund holding costs on the Northwest Rubber Site, and then to come in and start working on Alpine Avenue and the design for Alpine Avenue and construction documents to move that forward. So I wanted to share a little bit about the most recent discussions MIRAC has had about Alpine Avenue. They've been talking about the need to do Phase 2 of Alpine Avenue, and in the plan, it's described that Phase 2 should be completed by 2028, so we're actually on good timing for that. The first phase was completed in 2018. They started the discussion for design and development of Phase 1 in 2015. And if you see here, there's 3 different districts that were identified in the plan: the Festival District, the Craft District, and the Future District. So Phase 1 was 7th Avenue to 11th Avenue, and Phase 2 will be 11th Avenue to 13th Avenue, comprised of 4 blocks. Phase 1, again, was $2 million out of urban renewal, so there's $3.3 million remaining. And Mayor, thanks to your efforts and Representative Elmer's efforts and Senator Starr's, it is likely that there will be $1.5 million coming to the agency for the remaining cost of that project, so we can move forward with it imminently here. So in the plan, it talks about Alpine Avenue being the central spine for the district, that it needs to be a primary pedestrian route, that it supports craft workshop atmospheres, that has a festival street near the Granary District, and it's a catalyst public improvement project. That's all language right out of the plan. The design for Phase 1 was based on several different areas that the committee looked at, but from what I understand, this was all done before my time, so for those of you who are here, if I get it wrong, let me know. But from what I understand, Granville Island was influenced the discussion for how the McMinnville felt this area could develop and should redevelop it, and also the sort of palette for this area. So Granville Island, if you're not familiar, was an old industrial area, and then eventually was redeveloped into this thriving sort of crafts workshop farmers market area. And these are some pictures from that. But it has a distinctive sense of place associated with it. So the Alpine Avenue project phase 1 took about 1 year to go through design to construction documents, bid, and award. So we were looking at that in terms of time frame, and had several different meetings and design charrettes and community forums that came up with the design that you see out there today. This is some pictures that I grabbed from old PowerPoints that show the committee that worked on this. Many of these people, I'm sure, are familiar to you. And many of them were part of MURAC when I first started here 9 years ago. But this is what Alpine Avenue used to look like. So very narrow road with no sidewalks and no curb and gutter. And so the design challenge identified at that time was to balance the design for people and vehicles. So that it's meant to be a primary pedestrian avenue, and to support the new and existing economic vibrancy and investment. So what that meant was it also needed to balance how freight came into the site and into the district, because there were still industrial businesses working there that were dependent upon that freight. They came up with design principles that reflected that design challenge, and that was the decision-making filter for how they came up with the design. And then they looked at several other facilities around the Pacific Northwest. What's interesting to me is all of these are curbless environments, so I'm assuming that that was an initial decision that was made, and then they started looking at what does the design look like for all those curbless environments. They then had a discussion about what would be the freight routes into the area to support existing businesses, so that they would make sure that they would design the radii at those intersections with Alpine Avenue in such a way that it didn't interfere with the large truck movements. But you'll notice it is identified for some and not all local streets that are coming off of Lafayette Avenue into Alpine Avenue. And then they will start going through a discussion of design itself, especially for the festival district. So all the designs had some sort of meandering chicane, we call it a chicane, but it's a meandering access way for the vehicle, and that's what prevents slowing down the vehicle, so it can be this primary pedestrian environment. And so there were two concepts that it looks like it came down to, the fields concept and the park concept for that festival district. And the fields was the one that people felt had the most functional organization and what the community went with in the end. And so from that, they developed a typical section for the road. So you'll notice the vehicular environment is only 20 feet wide. And so it's a much narrower environment for vehicles than what we're used to probably, even though it's still a 60-foot right-of-way. So it's the opposite of downtown, where you have 20 feet dedicated to sidewalks and 40 feet to the roadbed. And then they started populating how this design would look relative to the different buildings there, and started communicating out the door how they were going to do that. And as you know, it ended up with a unique design palette to reflect that industrial area, but also that sort of craftsman heritage that they were trying to promote. So there has been decisions already made as to what the furnishings and the streetscape would look like. And then this was all put together into what's called a final design methodology memorandum. So there's like this 45-page document which describes what the design for Alpine Avenue should be. And that's what governed the phase 1. We also did local street designs too back in 2019, when we started having some of that development occur after Alpine Avenue was built in 2018. And the local streets were built, the development was building the local streets, so 9th Avenue is a great example of that. So we needed to have a design. So we went through a process of looking at that design memorandum for Alpine Avenue and brought some of those elements over into the local streets, but not all of them. so that it still mimicked the same look, but it was more reflective of need for parking on the side streets. You don't have the large core 10 planters there and things of that nature. The reason why phase 2 is important now is, and the plan calls this out, it walks us through all these processes. It identified a development program that it felt was going to happen in the Northeast Gateway District that was based on this sort of craftsmanship businesses, so flexible open space, which you see at the Mac Market, woodworking and metals. There's a couple of craftsmen down there right now with that, specialty craft foods and winery and breweries. And then it also talked about the need for high-density housing, so townhouses, row houses, wood frame condos, and mixed-use and mid-rise apartments. We haven't seen the housing materialize as much, but as you know, we're working on the Northwest Rubber site, which will have the mid-rise apartments and housing. So the short term had a goal of the first 5 years of 50 multifamily units and a combination of commercial square footage, which we've achieved the commercial, not the 50 multifamily units. And then the long term, the next 5 years, is meant to be when you start implementing the rest of the projects there, is when you get to 220 multifamily units and more commercial space. So the Northwest Rubber site that we're talking about right now is 171 units. So it's pushing us into that long-term program anyways, where we need to start doing Alpine Avenue to serve that site. And we are getting more commercial square footage in that area as well. So that's where MIRAC was like, we need to start talking about the design of the future district, this next phase 2. These are some examples of the pictures. This is back from when, in 2015-ish, when they were first putting these designs together, but it looks very similar to that today in the second phase of what we're trying to come in and improve. So very similar to the first phase, except this is now a gravel street. So phase 2, the discussion has been, what should the design be? We have a baseline design. There's discussion, it needs to mimic what exists in phase 1, but does it need to really be a mirror of it? Or is there another way to look at that design to serve that area of the district? And so having that discussion. Also, the need to do public engagement. MIRAC felt it was really important to get the property owners that are impacted in that district by the street improvement project involved in the design discussion. So their recommendation is to do that and put together a project advisory committee. And the first design discussion would be what carries forward into that future district in terms of design elements. So we have that memorandum with all the streetscape furnishings and the different design constructs. What do we want to bring forward? And then do the construction documents and get it constructed. We've estimated that it will be about $450,000 to get through the design process to the 100% construction documents with a full survey done as well, so that we can move right into construction. The other thing that MIRAC did also want to remind you as the Urban Renewal Board that as we're thinking about Alpine Avenue Phase 2, there's still work that was left undone for the festival portion of the street in terms of having above ground utility hookups. So electrical support and water hookups and water infrastructure for flowers and the bed plants and things of that nature. We did, when we hosted our first event on Alpine Avenue when we first opened it up, and identified where all the deficiencies were in that regard, and actually came up with a plan to retroactively come in and put that design on the ground. We elected not to move forward at that time with it, because there was we were early in the district in terms of the tax increment funding. There was concerns about the cost. But MIRAC's recommendation is, as you work forward to phase 2, this really needs to be resolved as well. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. It's more than just your annual financial report, but it's an opportunity to share with you what they're working on and thinking about for next year.
Who wants to start? Councilor Chenoweth?
Sure, I'll start. Couple of questions. First off, thank you for the report and thank you for the information you've presented in here. Is this the time for us to be weighing in on what we would like to see the priorities be ourselves within this list that has been provided to us?
Yeah, Certainly.
So I'm a little concerned about continuing to build out infrastructure when we have real serious existing infrastructure problems occurring within the district. It seems like the funds that we have available to us should be used to, as much as we can, facilitate the repair and the movement of fixing the infrastructure problems we currently are dealing with. Specifically, our downtown core. We know we're looking at anywhere between 18 to 31 million, depending on what project list you look at, of infrastructure needs that are needed down in the existing downtown core. I would like to encourage us to consider minimizing what we do with the Alpine District and instead repurposing as much of the money as we can to right-sizing the project on the downtown core and using the funds as much as we can to get that project off the ground and moving.
Yeah, so there's a couple of steps that you would need to take to do that. So remember, I started by saying this is the plan, these are the projects, and this is how many funds you can spend on each project. And so the 3rd Street Streetscape project is above ground streetscape furnishings. It's not what the project is today. It's not a street improvement project. And the funds in the plan allocated to is $2.3 million based on 2013 dollars, which we think is a little over $3 million at this point. So if the agency wanted to spend more money than what's allocated to it in the plan, the agency would have to go through what's called a major amendment to the plan to do so. And you would either have to increase the maximum indebtedness that's allowed in the plan or remove money from other projects in the plan to do so.
To be clear, I'm not arguing that we should look at the URA to pay for the entire 3rd Street redevelopment. But what I am saying is that we should take as much money as we can from the URA at this point and focus it on getting that area fixed.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. And we did sit down with the finance director, Walt Gall, when he was still chair of MURAC, and these discussions were all taking place. We did sit down with the finance director, looked at the cash flow, and remember I said urban renewal is meant to be bonded debt. It's not meant to be pay as you go. So we wanted to see what the current cash flow would support in terms of future bonds, and looked at needs for Alpine Avenue and for 3rd Street to move forward in the near term. And there's enough cash flow in the system right now to support the bonds for both.
And to be clear, also, I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't complete Alpine. I'm just saying scale it down. Let's free up as much funds as we can to repurpose towards accelerating the process of getting the downtown core underway.
Yeah, I get that, but I guess what I'm saying is you could do both fully right now based on the amount that's allocated in the plan to them for bonded debt. If you want to put more into the 3rd Street improvement project than what is allocated in the plan and allowed to be put in there, you would need to go through a major amendment process to the plan.
So question, Heather, is so if we do the 4 blocks that are left, not to the scale of what we have as much of the festival, but more paved, nice, do it nice, but simpler, could the balance that's been designated to that just go towards finish the design plan for 3rd Street? Is that going to need to be?
You can spend, I'm going to say this again, you can spend up to the amount of dollars that's allocated in the plan to the 3rd Street Streetscape project. If you want to change the amount of dollars allocated to that project and what that project actually is, you need to go through a major amendment in the plan. So whether you're saving money with another project, it doesn't mean you can automatically put that on the 3rd Street project.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying, but what I'm trying to advocate for is that we should do exactly that. We should put forth a discussion point at MURAC to consider putting forth an amendment, and that amendment should be minimizing is not the right word, but scaling back what's happening on Alpine and increasing what we want to do with 3rd Street.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Peralta, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So the $1.5 million that came in through the state funding this year, how does that affect the overall bottom line for the MURAC fund and for this project? Thank you.
So the $1.5 million was what we estimated to be the gap funding for the Alpine Avenue project, based on something somewhat similar to what was done in the first half, but not to the full bells and whistles as the first half. What we don't know for phase two, and I may start deferring to Jeff because I'll get over my skis on this, but we don't know what the survey on the ground looks like. We don't know what the constructability looks like for those remaining 4 blocks. I think it's going to be more complicated in that regard than the first phase, and then also how the improvements interact with the intersections of the local cross streets.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Mayor. Okay. So we got $1.5 million as the gap funding, and then the remaining amount was estimated to be how much?
About 3.3.
So the total all in that project is 4.8, or does that include or not include the 450 we talked about for the design?
That includes that.
Thank you.
Any other counselor have a question? Scott, you're kind of looking like you might. Counselor Cunningham?
It's not necessarily a question. I am taking note as to everything that's been said on the dais so far, and I would actually agree with it up to a point that I think that we need to look at those remaining 4 blocks and not necessarily look to the past where we had the idea, if we build it, they will come, and unfortunately, they just didn't show up, or at least in the rate that we'd hoped for. But at the same time, I understand that it's critical to get those floor blocks finished to at least the caliber of every other street we have here in McMinnville, so that when people are looking at redevelopment, that it's looking at something that can be, you know, basically shovels in the ground and something that works immediately. But I certainly would be, and I probably will be a lot more excited if we get the RB rubber plant moving along for the housing, so.
Yeah, and you just reminded me, and I forgot to share this with you. I didn't know how deep we go into this discussion, but the MURAC has been exploring, over the years, we have brought in property owners from what I'm going to call the northern section of the district. It's in a fairly awkward compass, but from that northern area of the district where there is less improvement value, right? So you have staging grounds up there, you have some warehousing, to find out what would it take to stimulate redevelopment. And because there aren't improved streets, the public improvements are more expensive than the redevelopment would be. And so we've heard from them that that's a significant deterrent for them moving forward with some sort of redevelopment project in that area.
I have a question just about the future budget for urban renewal. So tonight, we're going to be looking at the $850,000, and part of that is $97,000 that needs to come from the city for matching. And I know it's kind of a mixed utility, but is that in this budget? Have you planned for that?
Yeah, so, and Jeff's going to probably share more of this with you when we get to that agenda item, but we talk a lot about it being $850,000. It's $850 is what we got as the federal allocation. There's $200,000 in the budget for urban renewal for this phase of the 3rd Street Improvement Project. We've carried that in the budget. We had it this fiscal year as well. That was always intended to match the $850 in terms of providing both the city match and more to come into the budget. And some of the determination for that is based on, again, that project is just the streetscape project. So what's the proportional funding required from the Urban Renewal Agency for the overall project moving forward that passes the sniff test of what the plan is planning for? So that's where the $200,000 allocation came from.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions?
I had a question.
Councilor Tukalski?
Yeah, thank you. Heather, it doesn't talk a lot about public parking specifically. It talks about public parking a number of times, but it doesn't have any details in there.
In the plan itself,
Yeah, and I
or in
understand,
Alpine Avenue?
no, in the urban renewal plan, but
Yeah.
I understand it's early for that, but the concern is that there's already a limited parking in that area, and I know we're talking about acquiring land for that, but are there any further details about that?
No, and I've always said that I think it's kind of interesting. I've worked on developing a couple of urban renewal plans in different downtown areas, and it's always been curious to me that there's so little money of the $30 million allocated to public parking for this particular plan, given, the build-out that it's coming into. So the project itself does talk about adding inventory into it, so we've been looking at it from that perspective, but how much inventory can you add with $1 million? Not a lot, to be frank. So that's where we've had the discussion that if we move forward with the downtown master planning process, a big part of that will be parking. Where does it make sense to bring more public parking online? How much is it going to cost? Do we need to amend the urban renewal plan to put more dollars into public parking to support that? Do we need a fee in lieu of parking for the area of our downtown that doesn't require parking? All those have been discussions with MURAC relative to that downtown master planning process.
Okay. The reason I ask is because $1 million in 2013 is not.
It's not a lot of parking
six.
stalls.
No, I don't understand how that's even sufficient. So after our last downtown analysis, we ended up with more handicap spaces than anything. And it seems like it reduced the parking opportunities in a lot of areas. And obviously that's federally mandated, but I'm just concerned about parking in general.
Yeah, and I can share with you, the MURAC members are very concerned about that too, and have had those discussions. And that $1 million is for, acquisition of property plus build out, so.
Yeah, you're not going to get much for that.
Yep.
Mayor, may I ask a few others? I guess is there any kind of a monetary value that's attached to the impact of the taxing district for like fire and law enforcement in county, being that this is going to be still part of the urban renewal area, but has it been considered how much is being deferred from those areas that they won't receive?
The foregone revenue?
Yeah.
So and again, I wasn't here when this was done here, but when you put together an urban renewal plan, you have those discussions with the overlapping taxing districts. So I'm assuming when the plan was put together and the $30 million was decided upon, that the city had discussions with the impacted overlapping taxing districts. At that time, fire was in the city, police is in the city, so those two were encumbered under the city of McMinnville, but I'm assuming there were discussions with the county and the other overlapping taxing districts, because you actually have to, by law, get concurrence from overlapping taxing districts to move an urban renewal plan forward. Urban overlapping taxing districts can come out against the city voting on an urban renewal plan, and I forget what the law is now because it changes all the time, but it allows the overlapping taxing districts to participate in the dialogue and have impact on the final decision. Some cities will move forward with a shared revenue model, meaning that, and this is built into the law when you get to a certain size for an urban renewal district, but you can decide and that's not in this plan, so that this was not elected for McMinnville, but once we got into a point where we've collected this much money, so let's pretend it's 20 of the 30 million, we're now going to start shaving off and sending to the overlapping taxing districts a proportionality of that every year. It means it's going to take longer for the district to get the projects done, but revenue's going to the overlapping taxing districts during that time frame. So those are all things that agencies and cities can talk about with overlapping taxing districts, and if you do go through a major amendment process, we'll have this discussion with overlapping taxing districts. We have to have, if we're going to do an amendment to the plan, it's a major amendment. The major amendment means we're talking to the overlapping taxing districts and going through that process. And if you do it for even just the 3rd Street project, or you do it for more parking funds, whatever it is, those discussions will need to take place.
Okay. And Director Richards answered that question that I had, but I have one further question.
Okay, one more.
Yeah, thank you. On page 13 of your presentation, it talks about the transportation projects. It shows what has already been paid, and if you could bring that up again, it might be helpful. But there's no prioritization on the remaining projects that weren't taken care of by transportation. There's actually a planned time frame, but a time frame is a goal, but it's not a prioritization of projects and funding, as far as I can see.
So the time frame is important because you have to create findings why you're not following that. But, oh, I thought I had it on the, excuse me. I'll go back to where you were. But what's interesting is if you do so following the Councilor Chenoweth's board member, Chenoweth's discussion, sorry for all those that this is impacting.
Yeah, that one.
There we go. If we go through a major amendment and say, hey, we have savings because these projects were paid for by the transportation bond, so we haven't invested in these projects. We didn't spend 1.2 million on Fifth Street. We didn't spend 700,000 on downtown signals, right? So that's in the maximum indebtedness of 30 million, but we didn't use it. So we go through a major amendment process and we say, you know what, we have more need on Third Street. And we didn't use those funds, so we're not going to increase the maximum indebtedness, but we want to reallocate it to the Third Street project. That's kind of, those are some of the discussions you could have with the overlapping taxing districts to say, it's not going to impact you more than it is today, but we'll be able to get more of this done, whatever this is.
Thank you, and that answers the question of if can those dollars be used elsewhere. It sounds like yes, but we have to have that conversation with the partners.
Yeah, and you have to amend the plan. So amending the plan would mean removing those projects from it and reallocating the dollars.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Thank you.
No.
Can you remind me, does the URA auto-renew, or is it something that comes to a vote of the council at its conclusion?
So it doesn't renew after you've met your $30 million of maximum indebtedness. That it sunsets. That's how we describe that.
But a lot of URAs end up continuing.
They will continue by action, so they continue by major amendments. So there are some communities who feel that there's still need in that area for some projects that weren't conceived previously, i.e. maybe parking, and so they want to increase the maximum indebtedness, and so they'll go through a major amendment to increase it. There are agencies, when we were in Redmond, we had 2 districts, and we sunsetted one of them early because we felt that the projects we had invested in had done its job. It was a revitalized area. We wanted to get out of it and let the taxes go to the overlapping taxing districts.
Okay, thank you.
But that's action of City Council and the agency.
Any other questions? Council? You don't, okay. Anything else? Okay, so now we just have the resolution.
Yes, you
that
do
we
have
need
a
to
vote.
address. So we have resolution, consider resolution number 2026-02, a resolution of the McMinnville Urban Renewal Board approving the annual financial report for the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025 per Oregon Revised Statute 457.460. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So I have a motion from, Counselor Gary,
Second.
Commissioner, and a second from Counselor Cunningham. Any questions?
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Yes.
It's probably rhetorical, but just approving this doesn't mean that we can no longer modify it, correct?
Right, we're just accepting the budget. If we
Yes,
at some point want to come back to modify, we can do that.
Thank you. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Well,
Am I correct?
so I'm
Later.
going to punt to the finance director because these are audited numbers. So I don't know if you would modify the fiscal year end June 30, 2025 numbers.
Yeah, that's,
We're just approving at this point the financial report itself. The rest of the discussion is outside of the parameters of the resolution.
Yeah, so the
thank you.
budget for next year, you adopt through your budget process. Any of those other discussions would be outside of this too.
Thank you.
that's it?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Claudia?
Counselor Tukolsky,
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth,
Aye.
Counselor Geary,
Aye.
Counselor Cunningham,
Aye.
Council President Peralta.
Yes.
Resolution 2026-02 passes unanimously.
Perfect. I will now adjourn the urban renewal meeting at 6:50, and we will be back at 7 o'clock. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to now call the city council meeting to order and request Claudia, our city recorder, take a roll call.
Counselor Tukolsky,
Present.
Counselor Chenoweth,
As far as I can tell, I'm here.
Counselor Geary,
Good evening.
Counselor Cunningham,
Here.
Council President Peralta,
Here.
Mayor Morris.
Here. If you're able to stand, please stand for the pledge. It's time for public comments. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments, and any comment provided that requires some type of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a land use decision that is or will be in front of the city council, or a matter scheduled for a public hearing at some future date. Comments will be limited to 4 minutes per person for a total of 32 minutes. If you are on Zoom and wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature or chat feature and send a chat to the city recorder team. You will need to provide your contact information prior to being promoted to speak. Once your turn is up, we will announce your name and unmute your mic. Please announce your name and the city you live in for the record. We will start with anyone that has signed up prior. Claudia, do we have anybody?
Yes, and before we start, I do want to state for the record that we received 2 written emails that I have forwarded to City Council, one from Rachel Cantrell Weaver and the second one from Adam Stone. Those will be added to the amended packet posted tomorrow. First, we have Amanda Pawanka.
Okay. Good evening, Amanda. You are.
I feel so honored. Wow. Hello. My name is Amanda Pawanka, and I live here in McMinnville. And my little speech I wrote is more for the record and for our country, more so than our town. So just sit back, relax, buckle up, and please enjoy the show. We as a people are not talking about the Epstein files enough. We are not talking about the Epstein files enough. I seem to have everyone's attention, except, there you go. The files matter to everyone on earth. The files matter to men and women right now in Iran, fighting and giving their lives. Our military men and women are giving their lives right now for a cover-up. The crimes connected to the Epstein files are not just a scandal, they represent a profound failure of power and accountability. At the center of this story are young women, girls, and boys who are exploited, trafficked, and abused by people with immense wealth and influence. For years, many of them tried to speak out, many tried to tell their stories, and they're ignored or intimidated into silence. For many victims of sexual exploitation, coming forward is one of the hardest things they will ever do in their entire life. The Epstein case reveals how systems can fail when power shields wrongdoing. It shows how wealth and influence can create barriers. This is why accountability is so crucial. Accountability means that no one, no matter how wealthy, famous, or politically connected you are, no one is above the law. A healthy society depends on the idea that the rules apply equally to everyone. When that principle breaks down, justice itself begins to erode. When powerful people are not held accountable, the consequences do not stay at the top, they ripple outward. If the public sees that wealth or status can protect someone from consequences, it sends a dangerous message that some people live under a different set of rules. Case in point, the owner of Pinch Restaurant thought he could consume child porn and it wouldn't hurt anyone, completely disregarding the children in that situation and the consequences of his actions. We as a community were disgusted, saddened, and rightfully brought to a righteous rage. And I am glad, personally, that justice is being served to him. But the message that powerful people can get away with actual murder erodes trust in our institutions. It discourages victims from speaking out. It tells everyday people that justice may not apply equally to them. And when accountability disappears at the highest levels, it can create a trickle-down culture of silence and abuse. If leaders elites, or influential figures are allowed to act without consequence, others may feel emboldened to exploit their own power in workplaces, schools, churches, and communities. Accountability is also about prevention. When systems hold power people responsible for their actions, it sends a clear signal that abuse will not be tolerated. Listening to survivors is part of that accountability. And believing women, believing victims does not mean abandoning fairness or due process. It means starting from a place of respect instead of suspicion. It means recognizing that false reports are rare, while unreported abuse is tragically common. When someone finds the courage to say, "This happened to me," our first response should not be doubt. Our first response should be compassion and a commitment to seek truth. Justice is not only about prosecuting the guilty, it's also about changing the culture that allowed harm to persist. We owe it to the survivors to keep asking hard questions. We owe it to them to demand transparency and accountability from institutions and powerful individuals, and we owe it to them to build a world where victims are heard the first time they speak. It's essential to protecting justice for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
That's
Is
everyone
it?
that signed up.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does any council request to have any item removed from the consent agenda and heard at its regular place on an agenda?
Yes, I'd like to ask that we remove E from the consent agenda.
Okay, so E has been removed. Anything else? Do I have a motion to accept the balance of the consent agenda minus resolution number 2026-15?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Cunningham, a second from Councilor Tukolsky. Any further questions? Claudia?
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Cunningham?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Yes.
The consent agenda as amended has passed unanimously.
Okay, so now we're going to consider resolution number 2026-15, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Oregon Department of Transportation for the 3rd Street Improvement Project. Councilor Chenoweth.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Mayor, for the questions that you posed that we were able to get answers to. They were very helpful in helping me figure out what I wanted to do here, but I want to be really clear on one point. If we vote yes on this, how hard is it going to be if we decide to go with state and local funds instead of federal funds down the road? We run into for whatever the circumstances, we decide we don't want to pursue federal funds. What is this going to do to us?
So he's directing the question to Public Works Director Geoff Hunsaker.
Yes.
That's okay.
And our city engineer, James Lofton, also looked into this a little bit more yesterday as well, and he can come up and answer questions if needed. But essentially, if we start spending federal dollars, it federalizes the project, the entire project, and we'll have to meet federal requirements for that money, which includes some additional administration. It'll include things like Buy American steel and iron during construction, things like that. If we choose to move forward, and these are the only federal dollars that we ever spend on the project, and we decided it costs the city less to then defederalize, we would have to pay back these dollars to then defederalize the project. It's not something that happens very often. And James can probably speak to it better than I can, but that's my understanding. If we chose that we're going to defederalize the project, the only way to not meet the federal requirements moving forward would be to pay back the amount that we have spent. So if you decide, and you've only spent $50,000 of the $850, then you would have to pay back that $50,000 and then just not accept the rest. Does that sound right, James? Okay.
And then corollary to that, how fast are we anticipating spend down of this?
And we also have our two co-project managers here today. So Jeff, do you recall the time frame for spend down right now? It hasn't been firmly established because ODOT would be managing the project and they haven't set the full schedule, but we had an estimate. Either way. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I should have read it with more
Jeff Gooden.
detailed. I apologize.
Or, yeah, that's right. Like, did I say that name right?
Jeff Goodham, project manager. So it is in the staff report. The actual date escapes me at the moment. I believe we have the design of the loose schedule of September of 27.
Yeah, the schedule in the staff report says under contract, works begins September of 26, and then funds to be obligated by September of 27, and then fully spent by September of 2032.
So it's going
It
to
won't
take a
go
while to
that-
spend this down.
Yeah, I do apologize. So we didn't have a schedule for the design set out yet.
So, you know, in light of my previous conversation in which I was talking about looking at ways to reallocate funds from the URA, that's where I'm thinking here. And I don't mind potentially going forward if the gamble is less than the full 850. And it sounds like since we're looking at a long-term potential pay down of this, that gamble is out there a ways. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there's ways, the IGA has ways for the council to get back out of the IGA, and we will, if there's certain touch points that you want us to bring to you to discuss it, we can do those and bring back any information that you might need to help you make decisions along the way.
Jeff, is there an opportunity for the city to ask ODOT to draw down the city match before it draws down the federal funds?
That's a good
Maybe that's
question.
something-
We probably have to ask ODOT. We haven't given them our match yet, that we have to pay it out in full once the IGA is signed, but potentially, I'd have to ask, or Jeff and Jody would have to ask Valerie, but we could potentially do that. It's a good idea.
I just want to clarify a question that I did ask, and you answered it, but I just want to make sure I understand it. So we only have so much money. We have to finish the project, and the project is going to be higher going with these funds. That if we choose to do it in phases, or shorten it a tad, that's okay. If we start with the way it looks right now, going from Adams to Johnson, and we choose to, in order to be able to afford it, shorten it, can we do that later? Or do we have to specify now and add?
Yes, because essentially you would then say you're going to be phasing the project, and that first phase would be whatever that shorter section is that is the affordability. And then you would just demonstrate you're continuing to look for funding for the other phases.
Okay.
And that can go on for a very long time.
Okay,
So.
good, all right.
And you will have to eventually, all infrastructure has to be replaced someday, so you would be looking for funds to replace that over time. So if the project was shrunk, you would just then start phasing it, and then you would go after grants or local dollars or whatever it is for that particular phase, yes.
Great, thank you. Counselor Cunningham.
Yeah, I know some of this is to make us ready to be able to go out for the build grants, correct?
Yes, so to go after a build grant, you want to be much further along in design than we are. Shovel ready is always something that scores well in those projects, and you can also have better applications when you know more information.
And what, if we were to be going after a build grant, what would be the typical grant that we'd be trying to get for a project of this size?
25 million cap.
So yeah, the maximum available build grant for construction is 25 million. So we're actually in a pretty good place with the size of our project, because if we had a $100 million project, you could still only get 25 million. So having a project that's around that ballpark is helpful. if we didn't need that much money, we could go for a smaller grant, but we would likely go for the full 25.
Okay. And when's the next cycle for that?
Currently, the build grant cycles are annual.
Okay.
They've been around for quite a while. They were Tiger grants, Raise grants, build grants, and so they're annual now. The NOFOs, the Notice of Funding Opportunities, comes out in roughly November every year. The depending on the administration, the how the projects are scored is usually slightly different. There was a pretty big change, not a huge change, but there was a change going from the Biden to the Trump administration in the in some of the scoring, but it was usually the same categories, just more priority set on certain things.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge that tonight we've discussed $1.5 million in funds from state partners and this $850,000 from federal partners. So I just wanted to acknowledge both Representative Elmer, Senator Starr, and then on this, Congresswoman Salinas, as well as the mayor and the professional staff that enabled us to get these funds to fill some gaps in our planning. I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record for the public. Thank you.
Great. I have one more question. So you sent me back an estimate of 28 million. Was that before it was federalized?
I'm going to ask Jeff to answer that question.
Yeah, so that estimate, there was a range that the consultant provided.
28 to 31.
Design, so 28 to 31 million. And that is not a number that included federalizing the project.
Do you have an idea on a percentage that you think that would increase it? No?
I would have guessed. Yeah.
James Lofton, do you? Just keep asking people.
It was discussed with the consultant. It was anticipated that there's a likelihood we would need to federalize this project.
Okay.
And so I think it was taken into account for some of the construction dollars. What wasn't necessarily, I think, fully understood is the costs associated with the engineering and management of it, and then some of the other federalized elements, which would add construction cost, because that will be dictated by the federal process. And the consultant we had was not a federalized project at the time, so it was a little out of their scope to really dive into it. That being said, it was also contemplated. What we anticipate happening first, the first thing would be ODOT would develop an internal estimate. So early in this process, we'll get a much better idea of what to expect for the federalized project costs, and we'd anticipate that we'd bring that back to you and keep you in the loop.
Okay.
But they can't work on that until they have a signed IGA. So kind of a chicken and egg scenario.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for answering all the questions I sent to you yesterday. It helped for tonight. And thanks for coming up. I think we're done. Did you have a question?
Yeah, may I ask
I'm sorry.
Councilor Chenoweth a question? Is that okay?
Oh.
Wait.
Want to ask me and I'll ask him? No.
Sure, yeah, well, yeah, I'm trying to abide by the rules here. I was curious what Councilor Chenoweth's, I would say trepidation is with the acceptance of federal funds specifically, if you could articulate that.
Chris, or Counselor Chenoweth, he's wondering what your concern is by taking federal funds.
I don't know that I could articulate this shortly, but my biggest concern is locking us multiple. The increase in costs may not be worth the $850,000 we're getting. That's number one, because it may end up costing us more than $850,000 in increased cost to do this. We're banking on getting, if by taking the federal funds, it's putting us into banking on getting federal grant money that may or may not materialize. That's concerning to me. When we have a pot that we're looking at the URA that's available, and the state, we have had great partners at the state. So locking us into a federal program is a little concerning to me. So those would be the two big ones. There's some little ones as well, but those are the two big ones. One thing I will say, I don't know how accurate this is, but a report published by the Government Accountability Office examining GSA construction projects from 2014 to 2018, notice that federally funded projects trended 15 to 25% higher.
I would say that's accurate with my experience in the industry, and James is saying yes in my ear as well, and he's done more federal projects than I have.
So if I could just say on the record, I would like to see if we could phase this, and then also if we could use our, our state dollars before we use any federal dollars, that would be preferred.
Yeah, we'll explore that with, we can explore that with our ODOT partners in this, and we will also make sure to find touch points to bring information to the city manager who can share with the council on updates for cost estimates and next steps and what phasing would look like.
Mayor, I have one more question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Jeff, is it possible for the, I guess your department to bring it to the council before federal dollars would be spent, so that we had essentially a trigger to say yes or no?
If ODOT says we can go the path of spending our dollars first, yeah, it's just a request of the council to city manager that we do that, and we can bring that information up, see why we couldn't.
That is now your request to the city manager. And I appreciate whoever's effort it was to work with ODOT to try to do the city standards on the city right-of-ways instead of ODOT standards.
It was definitely a team effort.
Yeah,
So
thank you for doing that. That's a biggie, I'm sure, with the cost. So, all right, any other questions from the council? Do I have a motion or not? And the motion would be, let me tell you, consider resolution number 2026-15, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Oregon Department of Transportation for the 3rd Street Improvement Project.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary, a second from Councilor Cunningham. Any additional comments? Claudia?
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Cunningham?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Yes.
Resolution number 2026-15 passes by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, Jeff, for coming up. Now we're going to move on to ordinances. Consider the first reading with a possible second reading of ordinance number 5173. Does any counselor need to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest or recuse themselves regarding the ordinance? And I believe this ordinance is in regard to planning. We're going to call, nothing? We're going to call on City Attorney David Lightberg. The mayor is going to call on you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first reading of ordinance number 5173, an ordinance approving a comprehensive plan amendment, docket CPA 1-25, and zone map amendment, docket ZC 2-25, for approximately 26.07 acres located at 2325 Northeast 3 Mile Lane, 160 Northeast Atlantic Street, 2305, 2245, 2225, 2215, and 2205 Northeast Cumulus Avenue, and tax lot R4422CC 01102.
Perfect. And it says I'm going to call on Taylor, but am I going to call on you, Heather, instead?
Yes, Mayor and councilors, I am pinch hitting for Taylor tonight, our senior planner, so. So ordinance number 5173, what it does is it approves a comprehensive plan map amendment. It approves a zone map amendment, and then it adopts the decision document findings of fact and conclusionary findings for this land use application. It comes to you as a recommendation from the Planning Commission after they hosted a public hearing on February 19th, 2026. Just to remind you, there is no proposed development plan at this time, so we are just talking about the zone change. And the map, changing the colors on the two maps, the comprehensive plan map and the zone map. So this is our comprehensive plan map. This proper subject site is in what we call our 3 Mile Lane area. It's comprised of 8 parcels of approximately 26 acres. Many of you are familiar with it in terms of the Baker Concrete plant is there, as well as several other businesses. It's got frontage on Cumulus Avenue, which is one of our frontage roads for Highway 18. The comprehensive plan proposal is to change the comprehensive plan designation from a combination of industrial, residential, commercial, and floodplain to residential, commercial, and floodplain. So remove the industrial comprehensive plan designation. The zone change proposal is to change the zoning from an M2, so that's our industrial zone, C3, commercial zone, R4, which is a medium to high density residential zone, and R1, which is a low density residential zone, and FP, the floodplain, to the C3 commercial zone, R4 medium to high density zone, and floodplain. This is actually a project that is contemplated and directed in the 3 Mile Lane area plan, which was adopted by City Council as a supplemental document to our comprehensive plan. So our comprehensive plan directs us into this particular proposal. The 3 Mile Lane area plan, just to remind you, was adopted by ordinance number 5126. It was adopted in 2022 as a supplemental document to the McMinnville Comprehensive Plan. That's important because we create findings based on what the comprehensive plan tells us to do with the land use program in McMinnville. It serves as a guiding document for land use and public facilities in this area. And the land use concept in the 3 Mile Lane area plan contemplates having a commercial focus on the southern portions of the frontage there on Cumulus Avenue, and then locating mixed-use development and needed housing on the rest of the site, so a mixed-use development project. And this shows what the 3 Mile Lane area plan contemplated for the site, which is very similar, if you look at it, to the proposed comp plan map designation and zone map designation. So the criteria we use for a comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning map amendment is found in the McMinnville Municipal Code 17.74.020. It's a 3-part test. One test is it consistent with the goals and policies of the comp plan? One test is it orderly in timing? Does it consider the pattern of development in the area, surrounding land uses, and any changes which may have occurred in the neighborhood to warrant this proposed amendment? And the third test is utilities and services can be efficiently provided to serve the proposed uses or other potential uses in the proposed zoning districts. So when we're looking at a map amendment, we're looking at the aggregate use of that zone and not a particular development plan itself when we're looking at services and utilities. And that's important to remember because I'll walk you through some of the conditions of approval relative to that. So for that first test of is it consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, you have the decision document in front of you, but we went through all the chapters for that and determined it did with some conditions of approval. So there's 5 conditions of approval for this land use decision in front of you. For the second test, where it says it needs to be orderly and timely and consider the pattern of development in the area, surrounding land uses, and any changes which may have occurred in the neighborhood or community to warrant the proposed amendment, there's actually a caveat in our development code that says, when the proposed amendment concerns needed housing, as defined in the McMinnville Comprehensive Plan and state statute, criterion B shall not apply to the rezoning of land designated for residential use on the plan map. So essentially what that's saying is if you're going from a lower density zone to a higher density zone and it's for needed housing, this criterion doesn't apply. It doesn't have to meet this criteria. In addition to that, it says that the housing policies of the comp plan shall be given added emphasis. And the other policies contained in the plan should not be used to, 1, exclude needed housing, 2, unnecessarily decrease densities, or 3, allow special conditions to be attached, which would have the effect of discouraging needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay. So it tells us how to move forward if it's a housing project. So the city concurred and the planning commission concurred that criterion B is satisfied because this is a housing project. So it's exempted from criterion B as needed housing. So for criterion C, it looks at are the utilities and services, can they be efficiently provided to serve the proposed uses or other potential uses in the proposed zoning district? And so the planning commission recommendation to you is that the finding is that that this criterion is satisfied with conditions 1 through 4. So when we look at a comp plan map amendment and a zone map amendment, there are regulatory rules as to how we look at that. So for comp plan map amendment, that's going from residential to commercial or industrial to residential, we have assumptions of how that land will use services for transportation, like how many trips it's going to attract, for our wastewater facilities, for our water facilities, et cetera. There's assumptions associated with that comp plan designation, and we just apply it per acre. The same is true for a zone map amendment. So we have assumptions for our different zones and how much they're going to put impact on those facilities, and we apply that based on the proposal received per acre. So it's not looking at this many trips for this many housing units, it's looking at what's the assumption for a residential acre of land zoned R4. So, there were no concerns from McMinnville Water and Light relative to water and power. In terms of the wastewater facility, it's adequate per the 2008 master plan. So our 2008 master plan has assumptions for what industrial land would use versus what residential land would use. And based on comparing those two assumptions, in our 2008 master plan, it assumes that industrial land is going to use more wastewater capacity than residential land. We're currently in an update of our wastewater master plan. Those assumptions are changing, but we can't use the update that hasn't been adopted as part of our findings for this criteria. So you'll see that the condition of approval says, for this particular milestone, the map amendments, it meets this criteria, but we are requiring as a condition of approval that when they're ready to develop the site, that they will do another analysis to see if the services can support the development, and if they can't, what improvements need to happen to ensure that we have the capacity to support the development. So there's a second checkpoint down the road when development comes in, and presumably by then we've adopted our new plan. For stormwater, it must meet the city standards at the development stage, so again, that development's triggering that. And then for transportation, we did do a traffic impact analysis, so when you do a comp plan map amendment, you have to do what's called the Transportation Planning Rule Analysis, TPR, you'll often hear that, and a traffic impact analysis that says, what does this change do to the transportation facilities? So ODOT's looking at it as to how is it impacting their facilities, so that since this is on a frontage road, how it's impacting the intersections, and then the local municipality, McMinnville, is looking at it as to how it impacts the intersections locally. The analysis showed that the comp plan map designation amendment and the zone map amendment will impact by itself, so will create impact on where an improvement is needed at the Cumulus 3 Mile Lane Nehemiah intersection. And it recommends a right turn lane going westbound, so coming on to 3 Mile Lane from Cumulus. And that's for the queue that sort of goes around that curve there. But it didn't recommend any other improvements. And there was some question at Planning Commission, and there's been questions by city councilors as to what does this mean for 3 Mile Lane at that intersection in terms of traffic improvements and controls that are needed. That intersection is a problematic intersection. We're aware of it. ODOT's aware of it. There are improvements identified in our transportation system plan for it. This particular map amendment is not triggering that and making it worse. It's part of our overall system, and we have an improvement, and we need to move forward with figuring out with when to build that improvement for that particular intersection, but we can't apply it to this particular project, if that makes sense.
Heather, may I?
Councilor Cunningham.
Page 211, referring to the mitigation that you're just now referring to. The way I read this, install westbound right turn lane on the eastern leg and a southbound left turn lane on the northern leg of the intersection. So I read that as the recommended mitigation does include a left turn lane.
No, so are you reading that under Table 9?
Table 8.
Right.
I guess it's above table 9, right above table 9.
Right above Table 9. Oh, I think this was the original TIA, and then it was amended. So we did have discussion with both ODOT and the Lancaster Mobley, I think is the engineer that did this analysis. So there's a difference between what the project is creating and what the issues are for the conditions, right?
Okay.
And so the project is creating the need for the Cumulus Avenue improvement. It's not creating the need for the improvements at the intersection, but on 3 Mile Lane, but those improvements are needed overall in the system. So just like, I think you see emails in there as well. I'm thinking we provide the emails with ODOT where ODOT came back and said, we can't require anything on 3 Mile Lane because the condition already exists. This project isn't creating it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Counselor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm, we're talking about the, where Cal Portland is currently leasing that facility. It used to be the Baker Rock facility. And just reading from the packet, thank you, Councilor Chenoweth, for pointing it out. The industrial activity is not ceasing currently just because of this zone change. It just means that any future, they can't expand operations, and if there were things that were incompatible with the zone that would happen in the future, that would cause a problem for the property owner, as long as they're trying to keep it in this current use.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. So the property owner is very clear that there isn't an imminent development on the near horizon. He's putting the foundational pieces in place. He was in discussion with us when we were doing the 3 Mile Lane area planning process, and what was discovered from that in terms of what was thought of as the highest and best use for this property. He didn't come forward with, this is the highest and best use for my property. That was discovered through the process, and he supports it. And so he's moving forward with sort of this foundational piece. But yes, his tenants are still on property. He's working with the tenants. There isn't a near-term action taking place.
Thank you. And just
Thank you for bringing that up.
one follow-up, if I may. I just want to, kind of point out that when that Baker Rock facility went in there was far fewer residential housing in that area. And in particular, this is kind of the area where, near the area where Habitat for Humanity has done a bunch of their work. And so I think long-term, this is a really great shift for that area. And I would note that the proximity, even though it's separated by a river from Joe Dancer Park, is also very attractive in terms of expanding residential housing. So appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I'll be supportive.
Counselor Geary?
Just since the door on table 9 on that page 211 was open, a question, so I don't think I understood the answer. This table 9, planning horizon conditions with mitigation, which includes the PM peak hour, level of service delay, and the VC ratios, that's after development build out happens, those are the scores for the intersection? Or those are previous, prior to, current, those are current numbers?
That's the planning horizon, which is to 2041, with full build out of everything around it and how the facility is operating. And if you see that it's failing, but it's already failing without this project being in play. And so that's the difference, right? And that's why we're saying that it's not something, when you require an improvement, when you require a development project to pay for an improvement, outside of their SDC, so this is an additional improvement, it has to be directly proportional to that project. They're making that impact that requires that improvement. And this can't, because intersection is already problematic and is failing, is in our plan to improve. It's in ODOT's, it's in the 3 Mile Lane area plan, which ODOT also, I don't know if they adopted it, but they acknowledge it. So the acknowledgement is there that this intersection needs improvements, but this project isn't on the hook for paying for it. That's the difference.
Yes, so what I heard you say was that this is current standards, regardless of the development build-out proposed. Those are the
Yeah.
VC ratios we're currently hitting at that intersection.
In the planning horizon, which goes to 2041.
Understood.
There should be another table in there that shows current standards.
Well, that's the current performance.
Table 9 is planning horizon conditions with mitigation. So that's the horizon. Then there should be an existing conditions table as well.
It's table 3.
Thank you.
Counselor Cunningham?
Yes. Sal touched on it. With Cal Portland, I believe in the packet it says that they have additional years that they can add on to their current lease, but it does not call out exactly how many years that is. Do we have that number, or is it?
No. And it's not a requirement of the application to have that number.
All right.
Any additional questions?
Yeah.
Counselor Tukalski?
Yeah, Director Richards, from my time on the Planning Commission, I understand that we still don't have any R5 zoning in the city of McMinnville. Is there a reason that this wasn't selected for R5?
I don't know. I don't know if the property owner considered R5 and chose not to select it. The R4 has more flexibility. So if you recall, the R5 is all high-density residential, so just apartments.
Right.
And I believe the interest is to, at least in the 3 Mile Lane area plan discussions, the discussion was to have the high density there on the frontage of Cumulus and then to migrate back to lower density as you get closer to the river.
I understand, and that makes sense. The challenge that I see is the R4 zoning isn't driving the density that we expect from R4, and therefore we're not using the land according to the zoning that we've assigned. And this seems like an opportunity where we could actually increase the number of housing units in that area by making this an R5 instead of an R4 zone. So I was
Yeah, it would probably
curious.
increase it considerably because the assumption for the R5 for traffic would be much higher because there's no dilution, right,
Right.
of it. It could also trigger some transportation improvements that they're probably not prepared to pay for too.
Which was my next question, if I may.
Yes.
So holistically, the city continues to have these, I'll call them infills of housing opportunity, and that's great. It seems like every time we discuss these opportunities, the traffic impact analysis bumps the ceiling and never crosses the threshold. And it seems to me that the city continually finds these pockets of high density traffic, if you could say that. And holistically, our traffic is increasing significantly, but nothing ever triggers any kind of improvements. Is there ever going to be some kind of a plan that we could bring together holistically for the city to help ODOT say that we do have traffic challenges in certain areas?
Yeah, so there's two different discussions underway, right? So one is an overall system that feels congested, is what I'm hearing. And that system discussion, it takes place with your master planning process, the transportation system plan, where we identify as a system, we need these improvements in these areas to meet whatever our goal is for that area, right? Then when individual project, and that's based on existing zoning and comp plan designations. So we'll do it based on that. Then when a project comes in and says, I want to change the color on the map and go to something hot with more trips, let's say, we also have times when it comes in with less trips too. Then what does that do to that overall system we just created? So we design a system, we try not to over-design a system because you also are collecting SDCs to pay for it. So you don't want to over-design and charge more for your system. And so when something comes in that could trigger it and the system isn't planned to accommodate that, then we identify what are the improvements that project's directly related to, and they have to pay for that. Now, typically, if it's a project like this, which had a consultant on board and a team of, a transportation engineer and others helping them, they're doing the analysis to understand where are the different thresholds and triggers and what is it going to do to the system. We don't do this analysis. We're not telling them that's what's happening. It's a third party, it's a neutral third party. So I'm assuming if they, say, hey, can you run this scenario? And it comes back with, you need to build whatever, an interchange or something like that. Okay, that's not what we're going to apply for. We're going to apply for this.
I understand.
So you can, playing that out a little bit further, so they have the right to submit whatever application they want to submit, and this is what they submitted. You can say, we'd like to see all R5 zoning there, and so we'll change actually, no, we wouldn't be able to do that because it has industrial zoning on it. We'd have to pick a residential zone of some sort.
I get it. The only reason I've asked about the transportation is because we did the same thing on the Lennar Homes and Baker Creek area. And on my way to work the other day, the light was backed up all the way past the church. So
Yeah.
it's not insignificant.
Our east-west connections are concerning, east-west across the 99. So 2nd Street, I travel down 2nd Street to get to work, and I just time it based on how many lights I'm sitting through at 8 o'clock, right? So there are definitely congestion points at different times of the day in McMinnville right now.
Councillor Chenoweth?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Tukalski, for kind of opening.
I'm not done with my presentation, so my city managers, interim city managers over here on my shoulder saying, finish your presentation because it might answer the question.
That's fine. Let me answer one question for Councillor Tukalski. Having walked the area with a resident holding me by the ear all the way through the process, I would say there was a pretty loud neighborhood opposition to high-density residential.
Yes, and we will get to that. You're right.
Director Richards, please proceed.
Thank you. So this is a summary of the conditions of approval that are in there. So the sanitary sewer capacity, right now it meets the master plan in terms of the assumptions in the master plans or adopted documents. So that's the finding. However, we want to make sure there's capacity to support the development. So there is a condition of approval saying when development comes in, they need to do another analysis. The storm drainage plan, they must comply with the city storm drainage master plan, and private maintenance agreements will be needed. The sanitary sewer collection plan, they must meet city standards, and easements need to be recorded before installation. These are fairly standard for those. The traffic improvements is the one that's been identified for the map amendments, but again, that traffic condition of approval requires a traffic impact analysis with development so that we can understand what that particular development is doing. And then there's a fifth one, which is to meet the 3 Mile Lane area plan policy. So if you recall, at the very end of our public hearing process, which lasted about 8 months, there was a decision to take the policies that were suggested policies in the plan and make them mandated policies. So there's shall statements in front of all of them, and they have to meet them. The policies are responding to how that area is going to meet the great neighborhood principle, so they would have to do it anyways. But the condition of approval says you need to meet the great neighborhood principles as identified in the 3 Mile Lane area plan policies. Then we also show, does it meet statewide planning goals? Because we're doing a comprehensive plan amendment. So does it meet statewide planning goals? And staff went through that. The Planning Commission reviewed it. And the conclusion was that it does meet statewide planning goals with the conditions of approval as recommended. In terms of public testimony, they had a neighborhood meeting, which these types of projects need to have prior to submitting application. And right after the neighborhood meeting, we got lots of phone calls, so I can always tell when those are taking place. And, yeah, and there was concern from neighbors in that area about the R4 designation and what it meant in terms of high-density residential housing. When, with the public hearing at the Planning Commission, we had three people testify, Kathleen McKinney, Dan Jones, and Mike Full. And I guess I would say they had concerns about the density of housing. They also had concerns about it in terms of transportation impact. So typically we'll hear concerns about how many housing units are coming into the neighborhood, and then what does that mean in terms of the impact to the transportation system. In terms of housing density, this is an area, the 3 Mile Lane area, where we did, as part of the area plan discussion, decide that this could accommodate a lot of high-density housing in McMinnville because of the way the system is set up there with the different transportation systems, and we went through that analysis at that time. And so it was identified for high-density housing in our adopted comp plan document. And in terms of transportation impact, the concerns we heard were mostly about Northeast Atlantic Street, which is the street bordering the Habitat for Humanity project. So a couple of things there. They had concerns that that's a very narrow street and won't be able to accommodate the new traffic impact. It's a half-built street, so only half of it's built for the Habitat project. And so it would need to be a fully built street if this development moves forward for the frontage this development's on. And then Habitat for Humanity project is having problem with crowded on-street parking. And so they're working with us right now to look at one of their lots and removing it from housing and putting it into off-site parking to help alleviate that. The other transportation concerns were the discussion that we just had, which was that intersection at Cumulus, 3 Mile Lane, and Nehemiah. So looking at the different criteria in which we review these, which is the procedural requirements, did they follow all the right procedures? The McMinnville zoning ordinance, that's that three-part test I told you about. The comp plan and the statewide planning goals. Planning Commission is recommending approval and with the recommendation that it complies with all of those with the conditions as described. So your options when you get a quasi-judicial land use application is to, we bring it to you as an ordinance with the Planning Commission recommendation. You can adopt that ordinance which approves the land use application as recommended by the Planning Commission. So the decision document reflects all the findings the Planning Commission had. You can decide to adopt the ordinance and approve the land use application in an amended form. If you do so, we will need amended findings to reflect that amended decision and what criteria that you feel it's not meeting, and that's why you want to amend it. You can refuse to adopt the amendment through a vote to deny, but you need to provide findings for your denial. So why you think it doesn't meet that criteria that I spelled out for you. And you can call for a public hearing on the proposal. So you can say, you know, we want to hear more from the community about this. We'd like to have a public hearing. We would then set that up, but that's subject to the notice requirements that we do for the Planning Commission level. So it would be in about 30 days or so from now to do so. So those are the options in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any more questions you might have.
Any counselors have any more questions? Do I have a motion?
Oh, I have a question.
Excuse me, Councilor Gary has a question.
This is the lot that is identified as a potential future pedestrian bridge across the South Yamhill River connecting to the Joe Dancer Park circumnavigable trail.
I think it depends on the topography of that area right behind this. You might know that better than I, but yes, there is the connectivity planned, and the property owner developer has plans for the trail that goes through there in the back.
Okay, yeah, just as long as that stays in the identified path system and opportunity for that pedestrian bridge to go across. I know it's a little lofty, but I just don't want that to get lost, at least for easement potentials, especially if those trails are going to get developed, that would be a natural connection path for, especially for a lot of the concerns of kids getting into schools from alternate methods. That would be a great way.
Yeah, and I think that the property owner, I don't know if they're going to be the developer, I'm assuming they are because they've talked like that, saw the value of that as well.
Okay.
Any further, you have a question?
I
Councilor
I don't have a question, just a comment.
Okay.
In general, on these kinds of applications in the past, I have been one that has advocated for public hearings, and I will continue that pattern today. I think whenever you're having such major changes taking place to a neighborhood, giving the opportunity, even if nobody comes, is worthwhile. So that would be where I would land. I don't want to necessarily put forth a motion because I want to see where everybody else is sitting first.
Any more comments on that? Councilor Tukalski?
I would support basically a public comment section.
Public hearing,
Yeah.
okay. Any other? Councilor Cunningham?
This is actually, I'll say both things. Looking at table 4, the proposed zoning trip generation, I'd love for there to someday be a work session on how adding 200 units only gets us to 96 trips in the morning time, because I just can't see over 50% of people who would live in workforce housing using either public transportation or walking. So, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it is.
And we can definitely do that. We have in the past, it's been several years, we had Kittleson Associates come in and do a work session with City Council and the Planning Commission on how all these methodologies are reviewed and analyzed.
Yeah. But with that being said, I think that the packet was extraordinarily filled with lots of information, specifically calling out the transportation, because I think that was over 200 pages of the packet itself. So I think we did a great job there. And I would say that if there's appetite for a public hearing, I'd be amenable to that.
Councilor Gary?
Director Richards, what's the rough cost and time of holding a public hearing for this?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to look it up because I actually have a fee schedule that shows
And a rough assumption on staff time?
I would say for staff time, it's probably, to prop up a public hearing, it's probably about 30 hours of staff time to do so. And then there's hard costs, we're noticing it. And I guess what I would say is, the other thing to consider about public hearings is usually you will find land use attorneys and planners recommend public hearings when you feel you need more information in the record, like you haven't gotten the information you need. So for instance, if you want to vet the transportation analysis further, there's that opportunity to ask the applicant those questions. But if you're hosting a public hearing just to generally hear the same thing, you're creating an expectation for the people who want to participate in the public hearing that there are different findings in front of them, if that makes sense.
It does. So just on the public hearing, I think I have sufficient information to decide on this. Without having that, I think lacking a large hole in this application and not seeing any threads of criteria to start working away at, and I don't see a reason to not approve this. And then the main one I was zeroing also is transportation, and on this one, it seems to me our roads are already over capacity, and it would be more worthwhile to throw ourselves into the TSP effort update, as well as funding the improvements in current and future TSPs.
Councilor Peralta?
I have a question. So when this actually gets developed, the development itself will go through the planning process and very likely end up back at the council, won't it?
Depending on the type of development. So if it's a planned development, it would just go to the Planning Commission. That's what's set up in the 3 Mile Lane area plan. It would go to the Planning Commission in a public hearing process. They would make a decision, and then that can be appealed to City Council.
Right. Sorry, may I continue? So it seems to me that really all we're approving here is the right of the property owner to move this into residential. There's no immediate plan to move it into residential. It's not changing the use for any significant, it'll be a significant period of time before that use gets changed. So I kind of agree with Councilor Geary that a public hearing at this point is maybe a little bit of overkill, just given that we have, for myself anyway, I feel like I have all the information that I need to make a decision tonight, and I don't know that a public hearing is going to add more information for that decision, particularly as Director Richards has pointed out, the main point of contention from my perspective is the transportation impact, and that's not something that's going to be on the table for the hearing, so I question the need for it.
Any other comments, or do I have an actual motion?
Heather, did you already enter into the record the?
Oh, no, thank you, Claudia. So I did leave with you at the dais, for the record, attachment 2, which is the Planning Commission minutes from the February 19th meeting. When we bring you a Planning Commission recommendation, we need to bring you the minutes from that meeting. We've had some, the illness that's going around has gone through my team, so several of our members are out, and we got these on Friday and didn't get them to you until today, so we want to enter that into the record.
So acknowledging that colleagues are reviewing the minutes, unless there's further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the ordinance approving the land use application as recommended by the Planning Commission.
So I have a motion from Councilor Peralta. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Claudia?
Is this a motion to accept the first reading of ordinance number 5173 and pass to a second reading?
That's the motion I understood I was seconding.
Wait, what? Could you say that again? What?
Motion to accept the first reading of ordinance number 5173 and possibly pass to a second reading.
Got it. Okay.
Correct.
Councilor Tukolsky.
Yeah, I don't believe the traffic is correct, so nay.
Councilor Chenoweth.
Nay.
Councilor Geary.
Aye.
Councilor Cunningham.
Aye.
Council President Peralta.
Yes.
Ordinance number 5173 passes with dissent by a vote of 3-2 on its first reading and will be brought back for a second reading on March 24th City Council meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Okay, so we're going to move on with advice and information items. We're going to do reports from committee, councilors on committees, board assignments, and department heads. And I am going to start with Geoff Hunsaker, Public Works Director.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones tonight. We received the proposals for the transportation system plan last week. So planning, engineering, and community engagement staff are reviewing those proposals over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll have either a firm chosen, or we'll be moving on to interviews for our top firms for that. So that project's still moving forward. I know council is interested in that one. And then also there's been questions posed to me by the city manager, which I know some of the councilors are interested in, the Discovery Meadows Park fountain. We do have the 90% plans in hand. They're being reviewed by our park maintenance staff right now, and they are going to be working on getting me an updated schedule that I can share with you on one, the path for purchasing the equipment to install, because that's got a longer lead time, and then two, going for construction documents to have somebody get that constructed. We're still trying to figure out the timeline. We don't intend to have there not be a fountain this summer, so we might have to do a single pass through again with the existing equipment one more summer, but we are moving forward on that project.
Thank you. Chief Wood. Are you sure?
Well,
Today, the statewide tow board met this afternoon, and I got to spend a good portion of my afternoon meeting with the tow board discussing disciplinary cases for towers across the state. It was very exciting. We currently have 2 police officer candidates in the background process and 1 candidate who's completed the background and just waiting to complete the final medical evaluations before we can offer them a final, or give them a final job offer. Our management support specialist position has an accepted offer, and we're looking to start that person next month after she finishes up some obligations to her current employer, but we're excited to have her on board. Comes to us from some previous employment with police agencies in California. Tomorrow, we're holding an assessment center for sergeant candidates. It's going to be all day. We have 5 candidates to assess tomorrow. Our RMS project continues to move forward, and Director Burke may talk a little bit more about that, but we're to the point where we've begun planning for staff training for the new system at the end of April. And then I believe it's next week we have another process interviewing police officer candidates. It's a mixture of new and lateral officer candidates.
Thank you. Human Resources Director Vicki Hedges.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, I am sharing the bug with Heather's team. So I've been sick for several days, but I did attend the CIS conference at the last weekend of February. Heard some wonderful news about insurance rates. I'm joking, they're terrible. Be prepared for 2027. They're not great. Training activity, we are 13% complete, 30% in progress, and then 56% have not yet started their training.
Thank you. Information Systems, Scott Burke.
Thanks, Mayor. As Chief Wood indicated, we're still spending a lot of time with the RMS project. Turns out it's a lot of work to integrate 3 agencies together, get them all talking the same language over the same pipes and whatnot. So we knocked out a lot of technical hurdles last week. This week is a training week. Next week, most of the team goes to a conference where they're going to dig in pretty deeply with this vendor about a lot of things that are open and a lot of things to come. So a lot of good work going on there.
Great, thank you. City Recorder Claudia Cisneros.
Yes, a couple of items. The Ward 3 vacancy applications are being accepted starting yesterday through March 27th. We will be holding interviews on April 8th at a special called City Council meeting being held here. And then for more information on that, it's on the city website. If any counselors get direct applications, please do not open them, just forward them to me. And then just make sure you're telling people, go out on the front page of the city website. There's information there. We've also put ads in the newspaper. Noel's working on a Instagram post and then being added to the newsletter. The second thing to remind everyone, council and then others who have to fill out their statement of economic interest, that window opens March 15th through April 15th, so make sure you get those filled out. You'll see several reminders from me on those, and I do apologize for my several reminders, but trying to get you guys to fill them out timely. Yeah.
Councillor Cunningham.
Yeah, both affordable housing and historic landmarks committees were canceled for February, although we will be having a historic landmarks committee meeting this Thursday. I also attended the ICE verifier training that Unidos puts on, and again, want to assure everyone here and in the gallery that they do a really fantastic job of laying out like what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and really stressing to be as safe as possible for both themselves as well as the officers and the people that are engaged in the immigration action. On Tuesday the 3rd, I attended the tour of Stratus Village, and that was is pretty awesome. It's really incredible what they've done out there. I really was impressed at the quality of the common spaces, the laundry area, the mailbox area, but then the apartments themselves, they're just really well built, and I would say pretty durable. So I expect that they will get a lot of life out of them. One thing to note, I believe there's a little bit more than 170 units in total at that facility, and most, I think, 40% or so are already fully moved in, and they're looking to move in everybody else. And we're given the update that even with filling those 170 units, they have 895 applications on the wait list. So that is 895 families that are still looking for what we would deem affordable housing. So that was followed up, and I'm sure Sal will talk about it a little bit too. Friday the 6th went to the annual meeting of the Willamette Valley Council of Governments in Monmouth, and that was a very well attended, and I get to say I did actually win a door prize, so that was fantastic from our friends in Yamhill. So, but it was great to see everybody there and get to talk to our fellow communities. And then finally on Saturday, the 7th, I went out and attended the wellness fair that Unidos put on out at Chemeketa, and that too was pretty amazing, really well attended. Virginia Garcia, I just kudos to them because it is pretty amazing what they do. Brought out medical buses for people to have on-site cancer checks. There was lots of stuff for kids. There was Zumba going on, which was very active. So that is what I have.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Yeah, my committees both met, but I am again going to withhold sharing what we're doing because we're still in the process of putting together priorities, both in the SIP, at MWACT, and at the VLC. So until I have the final analysis done, I am not going to present here.
Councilor Peralta?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Councilor Cunningham and City Manager Garvin for attending the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments annual meeting and annual report. The one item of note is Betsy Earls of the Chemeketa Board is now the chair of the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, and really appreciated the opportunity to network with other local elected officials and staff for Business Oregon and some of the other funding partners that we had. Hopefully we made some good contacts for the city at that meeting. Thank you.
I have a few things. I traveled to Washington, D.C. and attended the American Public Power Association Convention and Legislative Rally in Washington, D.C. alongside General Manager John Dietz and Engineering and Operations Manager James Burke from McMinnville Water and Light. We joined other consumer PUDs, Eugene, Springfield, Northern Wasco, and Central Lincoln, so Lincoln, down Lincoln City. And we met with senators and congressional members to advocate on behalf of our ratepayers. We have concerns about some of the items that are on for the federal government in regards to selections of a new BPA administrator, deletion of the residential exchange program, and protecting the current BPA model that we at Water and Light use, protecting the Columbia River Treaty. All of these items can have an effect on the rates that we are currently paying. So we advocated for you there. And then I also have started a program with Superintendent Courtney Ferrua. We have what's called the community campaign theme, and we go by the hashtag We Care About Kids. And with that, her and I have made a pact along with Hillary from Lafayette, because some of the kids from Lafayette go to the McMinnville Public Schools, and that we try to attend as many activities as we can, whether they're school related or just community related with kids, and post about them and encourage them. So this week I attended the Diamond Dinner, which is a Grizzly Diamond Dinner in support of local baseball. The event is a fundraiser, but it also highlights the senior ball players of the year. She was also able to attend that. Also, yesterday, I attended the Blue Collar Tour, and it is at the Western Welding Academy. They're from Gillette, Wyoming. And then they have the Blue Collar Tour that comes to different high schools. We're lucky to have been here. They have been in McMinnville 2 years in a row. They talk about welding, they teach welding, and they get kids excited to join the trades. As a society, we're losing people that are in our trades, and having things like this come and teach the kids, get them excited. They have a YouTube channel. It was pretty fun. They do have 11 schools that will be participating this Saturday in a welding competition at the high school. If you want to go check it out, I'm going to try to stop by. It was great that Senator Christine Drazen was in attendance, as well as Courtney Ferrer and Commissioner Kit Johnston. With that also is one more thing is with the school is, and also the Oregon Mayors Association, is the If I Were Mayor campaign. You have until March 20th if you have a 4th or 5th grader, if you have a middle schooler or a high school that would like to participate. It's either an essay, a visual, or the high schoolers have a video. And it gets turned in. If you live in McMinnville, it goes to me. If they live in Lafayette, it goes to Mayor Malkinson of Lafayette. We pick winners and they get turned in to the Oregon Association for the competition. But each winner at that level in each one of our cities also give a prize. So it's pretty exciting to do that. And then I do have one more thing, which this is just a place that I was told that would be the best to do this, is a month ago at the council meeting, Councilor Cunningham proposed a draft to have us come up with a committee. So I'm going to just read what it's easier if I read it. A month ago, the council agreed to draft a statement with regard to federal immigration activity and solidarity with the community. Upon later consultation with the city attorney, it became clear that such an effort was going to take up more staff time and resources than I think we believed as a council, more than we anticipated, and would not to be the efficient way to create that because it made a subcommittee that required serial meetings. In fact, creating that committee did require that we not communicate with each other or collaborate on draft documents except as a noticed group in a public setting. I believe that we could draft more efficiently and produce a statement of solidarity for the council to take it up if we weren't subject to those requirements of such a committee, but we're able to work informally and collaboratively. I therefore would request that the council just consider rescinding the February 10th motion from Councilor Cunningham to create a subcommittee of the council to draft a statement with regard to federal immigration. This is not dialing back what we were meant to do. It just changes the process of how we can get it done. At this point, we have not met. We have not done anything. So I just wanted to bring that forward for consideration, and if somebody were to be interested in making a proposal or have questions. Councilor Peralta.
I have a comment. The process that we invited upon ourselves was ridiculous. So I apologize to the city attorney for not seeking advice before we made the motion and acted on the motion. I'm happy to rescind it with the promise to actually work to complete the process.
So I have a motion to rescind it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cunningham. Do I have any further questions or comments?
I would like to just.
Councilor Cunningham.
And yeah, and I've met with the city attorney as well as the city manager, and this is where being a young counselor proves to be a little challenging, that I didn't quite understand the gravity and the amount of effort that was going to be put forward, but I am thankful for the guidance of our city attorney to get us into a track that's going to be what I ultimately believe will be a better outcome for the city as a whole.
So I have a motion on the floor. Claudia?
Councilor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Councilor Chenoweth?
I guess aye.
Councilor Geary?
Aye.
Councilor Cunningham?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously by a vote of 5-0.
Great. And I just want to take one more moment and just remind the council as a whole that if you do have something that you want to put on the agenda, come to myself or come to Sal. Let's try to work it out ahead of time, the best process, so that we make sure that what we move forward is the best process for the city and for the citizens, okay? And I know it's a learning process, so thank you. Councilor Gary.
Visit McMinnville. I wanted to go over some lodging trends overall and then locally, and then give a little CEO report, and then I'll report on MURAC. So January 2026 snapshot. In January, room night demand among McMinnville hotels rose 15.9% compared to 1 year prior, with hotel supply unchanged. Hotel occupancy increased at the same rate, 15.9% compared to last January. Hotels averaged 46.8% occupancy for the month. The ADR, or average daily rate, declined in January 2026, dropping 13.1% to settle at about $124 a night. That ADR decline, coupled with increasing demand, netted essentially flat hotel revenue of 0.7% year over year to total $662,000 in January. But I believe the punchline is, if you're holding still, you're doing okay, as opposed to losing ground is bad in this climate right now. Short-term rental update from January 2026. January is key month for short-term rental bookings, typically accounting for 9 to 10% of total annual bookings. New Year budgets and winter travel planning often prompt guests to begin spring booking and summer trips, meaning January momentum can set the tone for the year ahead. In 2026, bookings in January rose 5.5% year over year. That's the fastest pace that growth has happened since July, and the second consecutive month of acceleration, signaling a local positive start for demand. Looking at the U.S. and the Oregon and then Willamette Valley for lodging statistics for 2026, as I've mentioned a little bit, occupancy rates 52.4% with an ADR of $152 a night for the U.S. Oregon statewide is 43% with an ADR of $115, and Willamette Valley specifically is somewhere in the middle at 46.4% occupancy rate with an average daily rate of $1.16. I'm going to skip these two tables because that's too much boring stuff. The CEO report, so you'll see a new ad campaign is afoot, and we'll be treading out in Travel Portland, Visitor Guide, and elsewhere. It's called Kickback Mac. If you see it, it's a new campaign. Additional step counts for that campaign will accrue in Seattle Monthly Travel Issue and the like, so you might be seeing some of that. Afoot, progress continues on the achievements and goals, and sites are set for another year of improving. So we sort of closed the year and reviewed goals, and we'll look to create new avenues for boosting RevPAR, especially in December. And then it's always fun to look at the Visit McMinnville website for the upcoming events calendar, and I saw that this weekend, this Friday, is the McMinnville Wine and Food Classic, and then upcoming is something called the Sasquatch Duro. Is a bicycle race on April 11th, and it's one of Oregon's Triple Crown bike races. So there you go for Visit McMinnville. MURAC, the work session really kind of touched on a lot of what MURAC talked about, but the only other thing on that MURAC meeting agenda was an application for $50,000 for the Hoff's Homestead development over on First Street. The ask was to help finish the build out of the interior of the project and went towards the stated $550,000 remaining to complete the project. The committee, after discussion, awarded the full $50,000, but in the form of a forgivable loan, with forgiveness being achieved after two conditions were met. Those conditions being A, final occupancy achieved within 6 months, and B, full business operation for 2 years after that. That's my report.
Councilor Tukolsky.
I too visited Stratus Village under a different capacity and was able to see a few things, so that was nice. And I am meeting with the Airport Commission on the 31st. That's my report.
Thank you. Katie Henry, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have half of our team out at training this week at the Oregon Government Finance Officers Association meeting over in Redmond. And then we've been working on budget, always budget. We're heading into the second round meetings. I know that you don't all see all of the specifics of what we're doing, but the department heads and the departments work on their budgets. We have a first round, then we go back and we crunch a lot of numbers, fix any mistakes that were found, and then we come back together for a second round and kind of do the same thing again. So those second round meetings are happening next week. So we're fine tuning these financial projections to see what do things look like into the future with where things are at, and then we'll be meeting again with each of the departments next week to kind of really fine tune things and see if we need any more meetings or if we're ready to start moving on getting the budget book put together to prepare for that. So that's where we're at in finance.
Thank you. Director Richards, do you have anything else for tonight?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to share. If you don't know, we have been without a code compliance officer since the first week of February. And yours truly is driving the weekends doing code compliance. But we did get a position up, and I think it's open today for a code compliance officer. It will be sometime soon this week, working with Vicki and Amy to put that together. And then we have brought in a temporary person to help us manage the caseload. We have 53 open cases right now in code compliance. We are addressing we're triaging, so we're addressing the most egregious cases first from a public safety perspective, and then working through it for nuisances. The community's been great when we explain what's going on with them, and patient and gracious, and I'm just asking for a little bit more grace as we get through this situation. So thank you for that.
Great. Happy to hear that. Attorney David Lightberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing from the legal department tonight.
Interim City Manager Adam Garvin.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of things that I've been working on or attended was already covered by council or other departments. We did have, from your January 13th ICE discussion, we had information on the website go live today, so that's captured on one of the homepage bubbles, as well as you can find it under the City Council tab. And then there's a sub tab on there related to immigration enforcement stuff, and we'll put additional documents on there, like the statement that you and Councilor Cunningham and Council President Peralta will be working on. The survey that the Chamber and UNIDOS and others partnered with us on is open until March 12th. Our ADA survey had over 150 respondents. It's now closed, but that will be back before you guys at an April work session. And so it doesn't, 150 doesn't sound like a lot, but given the targeted outreach we went for that, it was more of a quality over quantity approach that we wanted to take to make sure that we touched all those, as many factors as possible of that community. So we got as much insight as possible. I have a Yamhill County City Managers meeting on Friday, so that'll be just how we collaborate and come together as regional, just similar to what you do, Mayor, with the mayors. And then we will have the city buildings posting another ICE item. Those are in final design right now, and so we should have those going up and at the start of restricted accesses in buildings in the next week or two once they're printed. That's what I have tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So now the City Council will be going into the conference room for a close to the public executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602E to conduct deliberations with persons you have designated to negotiate real property transaction. Does any counselor need to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest or recuse themselves regarding these executive sessions for the record? I personally am recusing myself as I own property next to the RB Rubber site, so I will not be going into the session. Anybody else? Okay, I will now adjourn the City Council meeting at 8:29 p.m. Thank you.